Hi, welcome to the Andrew Buckle book review of Namor, Submariner. This is an epic collection, volume 1, Enter the Submariner. This includes work by Lee, Kirby and Colan, and obviously probably a number of other people as well. And this includes quite a few different stories. Now it's 400 pages in total, predominantly all the way through in colour. And, well, I'll just go through the stories in a sec. Just quickly go to the front so you can see all the various contents, and there's a lot of contents. And there you've got all the details of the various people, and it's published by Fry Communications, Mechanicsburg. Mechanicsburg, what a great name. Pennsylvania, USA. This was obviously during February. So what does it include? Well, it includes Fantastic Four issue 4, 6, 9, 14, 27, 33, annual number 1, Strange Tales 107, 127, Avengers 3 to 4, X-Men 6, Daredevil 7, and Tales to Astonish 70 to 76. So you've got quite a range of different stories. And it also says here, an icon of the comics golden age. And of course, obviously, this was a period where Submariner wasn't in his own book until he obviously got to Tales to Astonish. And then it wasn't really his own book anyway. He was sharing it with, of course, the Hulk. And, well, a lot of these stories have already been published, of course, in a vast number of epics. So you've got obviously the Fantastic Four ones and the epic collections for Fantastic Four. Strange Tales one, of course, Human Torch. The Avengers ones, X-Men. So maybe you may not want them other than for the very few stories at the back, the 70 to 76. Obviously, for complete sake, I thought, why not? But actually, it is quite nice to see all the stories as it goes through. Couple of moans about it. Would have been lovely if they'd added maybe the origin story, I shouldn't say the origin story, Marvel Comics number 1, the original Golden Age one. Would have been really nice if they included that. Maybe an Atlas period sort of Submariner as well would have been nice to include. And then straight on, obviously, to the Fantastic Four issue 4, where he first appeared in the Silver Age. But he didn't, so they didn't do that, which is a pity, especially when it's only a 400-pager. You think, well, they could have gone for a 450, 500 page, which is quite a normal size, but it would have been quite nice to have, included those stories as well. However, I love the list of all the various epics. It's getting ridiculous now. It's just getting smaller and smaller. Soon, they just have to be sort of either, obviously, ignore some of them, or maybe just shrink it down to the point where you need a magnifying glass. That's going to be the effect. However, one thing I did like here, we got here with all the various stories, is you can see the gaps between them, which I must admit I generally never look at. Like October 1964, December 1964, then obviously Daredevil was April 65. Then there was quite a bit of a gap, 3 months before obviously Tales to Astonish. But there was quite a few gaps as well. So you've got here, you've got May 1963 for Submariner and Puppet Master. Then you've got quite a gap until you get to the Avengers issue 3 in January 1964. So it's just nice to see sort of the period that it goes through. And of course, you've got all the different art styles. So let's just go through some of the story. Of course, here's the first appearance, the classic cover of Fantastic Four issue 4. And on the trail of the Torch. That's the whole point of the story. Torch goes a bit AWOL, and he ends up finding himself in the various New York, the Bowery of New York. And, well, he's reading the Submariner comic. Now, I'm not certain if this was ever a Submariner comic that really ever existed, because there's a little picture of the Submariner comic. Didn't particularly look like that. I'm surprised they didn't actually choose an actual cover instead of just obviously some random Submariner cover. Maybe it was a magazine or something that featured him. Maybe it wasn't a comic at all. However, you got, of course, the great story where I love the story. Now, I'm not saying this character ever appeared again, but he was, well, obviously he was probably killed, but there must have been a few others, I'm certain, that were similar sort of ilk. And look at the size of that guy. Not only that, they needed, I think, an atomic bomb to actually finish him off. It was like so big. Of course, poor old. Few spoilers in this, of course. Anyway. But however, weirdly, they've included the pin-up as well, obviously of Mr. Fantastic, which I assume was obviously in issue 4. However, you got number 6, a classic one, of course, Doc Doom. Doc Doom looking slightly odd there in terms of the colouring scheme. I noticed very, very, very green. And I don't think I've ever noticed before that the colours were slightly odd there. And also the old Submariner, obviously, or maybe he changed his pants occasionally, or shorts, or whatever you want to call them. Obviously, in UK, slightly different. But you got Submariner, it's really quite good. I love the way Doctor Doom and Submariner. I love also the way he's obviously got a very nice little room for himself as well. He just sits there and Doctor Doom's sharing a, well, looks like a drink he's got obviously in his hand there, but he sort of obviously convinces Submariner to be a bit more proactive in his attack against the Fantastic Four. This is my favourite of my stories I loved. End of the Fantastic Four, which you must admit at the time, you think, when I got that, end of the Fantastic Four, no, it's only just come out. End of the Fantastic Four already? They've been evicted, 5 tower floors for rent. That's it. Well, obviously not, clearly. But it's a great little story where they just go off and become part of a movie. And I think it's just a lovely story. That's one I still enjoy. And it's one of those ones that I think that could have been developed a little bit more. Would have been nice for an annual or something. You could have actually had a lot longer story, I think, would have been so much. I love that with the thing that it's just holding up all those people, obviously showing off slightly. About lifting weights, flame of battle. But actually, that was the thing that also was slightly odd in this one, was actually they were all separate characters, separate stories. So instead of, a bit like the Strange Tales, so you actually had a sort of separate Human Torch story. There was no other characters to help him. Which is slightly unusual compared with the usual things where they were always together. Of course, talking about that, the next story, okay, another feature page there. You got Strange Tales. This one, absolutely, I love those Strange Tales. They are really the weirdest stories. Really, you either love them or you hate them, but they're great sometimes because they're near enough Fantastic Four stories. Because you got there's Fantastic Four, but I mean, you got the thing there is very, very bright yellow coat there. But they're great little stories, and you've got Sue Storm. I love all the different fashions as well. You've got Sue Storm, very much in that period. Submariner strikes. And then you've got the merciless puppet masters, of course, as always. That sort of giveaway. It's not Submariner and the merciless. Well, I suppose he was a bit merciless. He was pretty useless as well most of the time, because, I mean, he could have done a lot more. Well, let's see. Who could I manipulate? Well, why not the President of America? You know, oh no, let's just do Submariner, because that's just going to end so well. No, I just seen some big oversights of his plans. Why not something like the, other countries' leaders and things? That would be pretty cool. Anyway, mere quibble on that. Maybe just obviously Stan wasn't thinking that. Maybe just obviously Submariner is a better choice. However, you guys got the brilliant Submariner there, Undersea Legions of Submariner, classic. And also, of course, you've got the brilliant Origin of the Fantastic Four classic and the Gallery of Villains. Though I must admit, I assume, and I have no idea who that other character is behind him. You've got down there, you've got a little. When you look at some of these pictures, sometimes you think, I wonder who that character is. It's like a guy in a blue coat. Was there a guy in a blue coat? Maybe it was an adventure they didn't do. However, this is a classic story. Versus the human race, no less. And it was right, of course, he was versus Fantastic Four mainly. You got a lot of behind the scenes, of course, of Atlantis. This is really the exposure, of course, the first time we really see any backstory in terms of a vast amount of information about all the various things. They were doing pretty good. Why they didn't sort of help humanity, but of course, humanity, of course, is, as usual, was using its own weapons against them and destroying everything. Very unpleasant. Then you got onto that's quite a nice one. I don't know where that one comes from. You got the poster, of course. I love it. There's a brilliant book, Marvel Masterworks Pin-Ups book, that's just full of these brilliant posters. I hope there's a second or third volume, or second at least volume of that, because I love that book, because they're just great, those pin-ups. I'm not certain where that pin-up comes from. Anyway, just seems to be slightly out of place. Maybe it's a cover or something. Who knows? I think I always find the paper quality is a bit unusual. It's a bit, obviously, very thin. You can see through it, actually. Just even against, not even against the light, I can see through that. But it's slightly curled up there. Anyway, Avengers meet Submariner. Brilliant story. I've got this issue. Love this issue. One of my favourite early issues of the Avengers. Just superb. And of course, they went back to that story in Journey into the Mystery, which was a great story as well. Actually, I'm surprised. I wonder why they didn't include that as well. I would have thought that would have been an obvious choice, even though, of course, the story was more Hulk. But you would have thought they would have included that one, because Submariner does appear in that story. And there were other appearances as well. And that would have been a nice thing. They'd included all of the appearances as well. Because there must have been occasional sort of guest appearance in that tiny little frame, a cameo. Why not include those as well? Just one page. Just put completist. Anyway, you've got classic Captain America lives again, joins the Avengers. There are many ways, of course. Submariner would have been a brilliant choice, and it is quite, when you look at this, and this is the slight depressing thing about this, when you go through how Submariner, he was like used as a sort of like obviously battering ram against humanity. But it would have been brilliant instead of actually, that would have really strengthened. And of course, Submariner did appear eventually in the Avengers, and what a great character he was. I loved Submariner, and I've always enjoyed Submariner, so that's another reason why I bought the book, of course. But it's just, I always felt that Submariner would have been great, because they lost the Hulk. Well, you could have replaced him with Submariner. The Hulk was an unreliable character. He's never going to be... But Submariner did work with teams. He was in the All-Winners squad, or the Invaders, obviously slightly retrofitted, of course, but it was that sort of storyline. And I love this one as well. So the art is always weird, this one. This is always the thing with when people say, about Jack Kirby's art or whatever, and you think, and I must admit when I was younger I didn't really notice this, but when you look at it later, you see you got this one. You got Jack Kirby, and this is by G.O. Bell, George Bell, I assume, but I must admit I have heard of him, but G.O. Bell. You can see the art is very different. I quite like it, but it's the same time, it's just, maybe that's the character. I don't know. Just always seeing Submariner as suit is always very odd. But he did appear in suits and things quite often in the Golden Age. So, however, this is a classic one as well. X-Men, Submariner Jones. I love that issue. Absolutely classic issue. Of course, Magneto, Quicksilver, etc. And then we've got another Strange Tales. Now, this time the artwork is Dick Ayers. I'm not certain. And the Thing looks very odd at times. Really, I don't think sometimes he knew exactly how to draw. Some of the characters were a bit squished at times. Very odd. But however, I always enjoyed this comic anyway. So that's a mere quibble. Quite often when you look at work, you think, that's strange. Why do they draw it slightly wrong, slightly odd? But side by side with Submariner. So occasionally, obviously, the Submariner did join forces. That's why it would have been great if he'd been with the Avengers. I don't think it would have worked with Fantastic Four. You've got the Thing, not really sort of the Thing and Submariner team would have been constant antagonism. Especially, of course, the relationship between Sue Storm as well. And obviously, just great. I love the artwork in this one. This one's just superb, of course. Chickstone. I'm going to say which one. I always end up saying, and then it's, of course, the wrong one. However, it was Chickstone, that one. Now, of course, this one is one of the classics. Though I always have to think that this, even though it's one of the classic covers, it does always, with Wally Wood, always looks very oddly wooden. Sorry, that wasn't intended as a sort of thing, but it always does. There's always a slightly something about the artwork. I absolutely adore Wally Wood's artwork. I've got so many of his books and comics over time, but there's some of his poses just somehow occasionally I look at it and think that just does not look somehow right, weirdly. Just also, of course, the eyes, the way the eyes are looking, sort of odd look on his eyes, looking out and looking the wrong way, as far as I can see. Anyway, mere quibble. But you quite often see stock poses. Quite often when you see a lot of these, especially if you get like the Tower comics. Tower comics are just one of the best. I love Tower comics. And I've got loads of those and I thoroughly enjoy them. Stories are daft. But they're just great and I love Wally Wood's work. So, but you look at them and you quite often see the same pose again. And I mean, look at that. That's one of my favourites, actually. There's one. Now, again, I'm not criticising because he's 20,000 times better artist than I could ever be. But that's just such an ungainly way of standing on. I don't think you'd want to stand on a ledge like that. That's sort of like you'd fall off. I'm quite certain. However brilliant you are in terms of, and what was he gripping on? He's gripping onto something. There's no grip. Anyway, mere quibble. However, weirdly, there's no mention. Obviously DD8 it says there. There's no mention, of course, that there's an upcoming story. Great pin up as well. Another Marvel masterwork. Just absolutely superb. Again, Submariner looks slightly odd there. Doesn't look. I don't think he looks like someone else. I can't place. Don't know. He's near enough got a moustache as well, which is really weird. But I suppose he could have a moustache. Why not? Could have had a moustache all along. That would have been pretty good. However, this is great because finally, Tales to Astonish, and he's in the split issue, and I love those split issues. Tales to Astonish. I don't know why they own them more now. I still, even today, whenever they do bring out, occasionally, very rarely, they have done that where they've done a split issue, and I enjoy those. 10 pages on one and 10 pages on another. It doesn't need sometimes 20. A good story can be told in 10 pages. A good story can be told in 5 pages. That's why you look at some of those classic Ditkos or something from 5 pages. Bang, story, bang, another story. Doesn't need 20, 30, 40, 500 pages to tell a story sometimes. My favourites are quite often short stories, in normal short stories, not comic short stories. And, 5, 6 pages. Great story, that's what you need. However, Submariner. Prince Namor. I love the way they did that. I only just noticed that. It's the first time I've ever seen that like that. Behold, the start of a sensational new Marvel feature, as it says up there. Imperious Rex. Always great stuff. And Namor is returning from his journey to the surface, which you saw in Daredevil 7, Stan. It says there, which is good. Now, this is the thing, obviously, now we find out a lot more about Atlantis at this point. And I love these stories. I love all the various characters that were supported around. Krang, good old Krang. Was a bit like Kang, I suppose. Maybe it was a bit of a sort of Kang. I don't know. But he was off on a journey, a quest, go off. And it was a pretty tricky quest, so he could prove himself to be. Why? He was Prince. Give it me. He should have his throne back. This guy, who's this guy? Warlord Krang. However, it's all going to end badly for one of them. And I'm not, obviously, we know which one it was. There's no spoiler there, is it? It'll be really. I love the old the creature there, sort of seaweed creature. That's kind of cool. However, within the monster dwells a man, and this one is Drawn in Grandeur by Adam Austin. I wonder what happened to Adam Austin. Like that guy just disappeared. Adam Austin, weird. Obviously, Gene Colan. But anyway, Vince Coletta. A lot of people criticise poor old Vince Coletta. I have no problem. The artwork in this is absolutely fine. I mean, tells a story. Story's really good. And this one's classic. Another World. And I thought, that's the Hulk, of course. But by force of arms. And you've got this story here, by force of arms. And you've got this. In many ways, I really enjoyed this story. I don't know why I've never done a similar sort of quest for Submariner ever since. Maybe. Anyway, it's a bit similar to the, just thinking about Doctor Strange one, where, of course, he's against Dormammu and Baron Mordo. And there was a long 14, 15, 20 sort of stories. So Marvel did occasionally have these long sort of stories where it's multi-story. And this really concentrates, obviously, just on one thing, the Submariner's quest. There's no other characters turning up. Nowadays, of course, what would happen? You'd have the Fantastic Four turn up. You'd have the Thor, Avengers, Spidey would be involved in the story. And it would be a multi-story along the line. And, it's good. So I'm going to have to just cut that bit out now. I'm just going to have to edit that scene. I've just shown a bit of page where I shouldn't have shown, which was the end of the story. So I'm just going to cut that bit out so it's not shown. However, but what a brilliant book. I mean, for a book that's got stories that have all been reprinted before, it is quite nice to see these sort of sequence of all the storylines where you have just one character. Yeah. But you've got Fantastic Four there, and you've got other things, and you've got Marvel Masterworks one. Again, I don't know why they couldn't have done a few more extras. Maybe some pictures of the Golden Age ones, the Atlas ones. Would have been something nice just to, because it's really quite skimmy, especially when you've got quite a skimmy collection based obviously on stuff that most people have already got. You would think that they would have made a slightly little bit more effort to put a few more extra bonus bits in to compensate for the fact that most people are going to look at this and think, I've got most of that stuff. But I think it's worth getting. And also, it's always going to annoy and certainly it would annoy me anyway, not having issue 1, because I've got that problem with Silver Surfer. I haven't got the Epic Collection Volume 1 of that, and that was done at complete all the period, and I didn't get it. And now, of course, I think it's out of print and impossibly expensive. So, you know, if you want this and you're a Submariner fan, I think it's going to be obviously one to get, even if you've got all the stories already. It's one of those things, unfortunately, just to complete it. And of course, you can always go for the Submariner Essential Collection or Marvel Masterwork, but what's the point? You might just get to those 7 odd stories. So I really quite genuinely enjoyed it. And it's actually, I love this, sort of going through these ones again in order and seeing just the changes of all the character. It's always good. So Namor, Submariner, Epic Collection, Volume 1, just come out, 2021, and really worth checking out. Totally recommended.